Hi everyone, welcome to JiraCon 21. Today, we are going to talk about doing release notes the right way, and I'm your host for this session, Anand Inanda. I'm CEO and product owner here at Amoeboids Technologies. We are a Platinum Atlassian Marketplace partner. Let's jump right in. Now, the session is named the right way, right? Doing release notes the right way. First, understand what's the right way that we are talking about. In the later half of this discussion, we'll also jump into the screen where we can see the app in detail. All right, so what's the right way? First is, we see in a lot of situations, release notes are being treated as an afterthought. Whereas ideally, they should be treated as a communication medium that needs to engage with different stakeholders rather than thinking of it as a document that nobody ever reads. Secondly, making the release notes writing and editing process part of the software development workflow is the most important part as far as making the release notes, the quality of the release notes is concerned. Then another common problem that we come across is many teams generate release notes in one single format. There is just single piece of release notes document that goes out to your customers, that goes out to your sales team, which is obviously not the best way to approach, because at the end of the day, these are different stakeholders that are involved and they have different needs, right? So the best way, the right way to go about this is creating different variants of the release notes document based on who is the target audience involved. Another very common area where release notes can do an improvement is utilizing visual aids such as images, videos, GIFs, and product screenshots. If you end up creating a release notes document without any of it, there is very less of a chance that anyone will actually go in and engage with that document. Next. Now, this is the interesting part. I'm sure the developers involved in here will see the value of automation, right? Creating release notes in multiple formats with multiple variants, with images included, with videos included. It's going to be a very time consuming process. Now, obviously, automate the process to leave very little space for the manual errors. And then finally, don't treat release notes as the last step in the process. Release notes should ideally be part of your Scrum artifacts. That is why you should really integrate the technical writers in your cross-functional Scrum team. Now let's jump into the details and understand how can you go about creating the release notes right way. Now, first point, if you recall, I talked about making release notes as a communication medium. Now, what's the context here, right? Why I'm calling it as a communication medium? From the customer's point of view, imagine if you were to create the release notes at the end of the software development process, there would be a lot of stuff that your technical writer will have to write about. But if you were to create the release notes as something like a customer facing acceptance criteria at the beginning of the development, even your software developers and the QA team will get advantage, will get benefit out of the process, because they'll know even before the development starts what the customer is supposed to see at the end of this development, right? So that's why I call it the customer facing acceptance criteria. From the customer's point of view, Again, you're not only publishing release notes for the sake of doing it. The intention is to get increased engagement from your customers, helping them understand the value that you are adding on an ongoing basis and retain them for a longer period of time. And finally, think of the release notes document as a channel for you to convey the roadmap progress to your executive team, right? So even if you look at this slide itself, there are three stakeholders that I'm talking about: the development team, the customers, and the executive team. And I've just taken these as examples. And you'll realize that the release notes document serves different varied purposes for all the three stakeholders. And as you bring in more stakeholders into this discussion, the horizon of use cases just increases. For example, for the support team, you're going to make them aware of any upcoming changes. For the sales team, you're going to inform them about any of the hot features that are going out via the release notes document. That's why it's important to treat release notes as a communication medium and not just a static document that's meant for to be attached at the end of the release. Now, another point that I had in one of the earlier slides was making the release notes a part of your development workflow. Now, given the powerful workflow engine that Jira offers, it's extremely simple to achieve that, right? So how do you go about achieving that? It's simple. Just utilize custom fields of different types, be it Boolean custom fields, be it single line custom fields, be it multi-line custom fields, and segregate them together on your Jira issue, right? And then utilize workflow to ensure that this information is filled out even before the development starts or before the issue is marked as done in its terminal status. Now, obviously, you can customize the workflow depending on your own needs, but using validators and conditions, it's going to ensure that the release notes section, the release notes content are never left empty unless they are supposed to be using the development workflow. This way, even before the development starts or even before the issue is marked as live, you get the opportunity to look at the release notes. And that is how you can easily integrate the release notes within your Jira's development workflow. Then, one of the points earlier called out was also not creating a single release note document for all of your audiences. No, that's a bad idea, right? So create multiple variants of the release notes document based on who is supposed to read that document. For example, you can create different release notes content for internal development team, different release notes content for customer facing teams, and similarly for executives teams. Whoever stakeholder is involved, whoever is supposed to get that information out, you can create different release notes templates using automated release notes app for Jira. Now, a very useful thing that people forget a lot of times is to ensure that the release notes document, the release notes content is aesthetically appealing to the end users. For example, in the screenshot that I have, in the slide that I have here, you'll notice there is usage of emojis, there is usage of product screenshots, there is usage of links, there is usage of flags. By doing this, you are making it easier for the end users to engage with your release notes document. And again, if you end up utilizing custom fields in Jira for storing these release notes, this is going to be extremely easy. You just have to utilize the wiki editor and you'll get the desired outcome. And last but not the least, you are supposed to automate the entire process, right? So you cannot really generate release notes for, let's say, 10 stakeholders with different content in one go. It's just not humanly possible. So how do you go about it? You create an automation within automated release notes. All the templates that you have created, you can just get them inside of this rule action and then decide in what way the release notes should be generated. Obviously, there is going to be a manual trigger, and we'll talk about the triggers in a moment when we jump into the app discussion. But the automation comes in handy to not just generate the release notes, but also sending out those release notes to relevant stakeholders. You can email those release notes directly to the involved people. You can publish them to Confluence. You can put those directly into your web application and so on. The bonus part that I was referring to, right? So there is a widget action in here and there is a release page action. So what you can do is, using automated release notes for Jira, you can insert the release notes widget right inside of your web or mobile apps. Fairly straightforward, but extremely powerful. Now, let's stop here in terms of the slides and let's look at the app itself. I'll just refresh the page, and while it loads, let me show you a couple of release notes samples that are generated out of automated release notes. Now, this is our release log page that's publicly available in our documentation. And this is Confluence, obviously, you may have guessed it by now. And this page is listing all of our releases for cloud as well as for the server and data center variant. And if you read this, it suggests this page is automatically maintained via automated release notes. That's right. So every time there is a new release on our app, automated release notes, that release is automatically published on our Confluence instance, and that in turn appears on the cloud releases and server releases area, depending on for what variant that release was for. It's very simple. This is nothing but a page properties report macro that we have on this page. And what automated release notes does, it simply publishes a new Confluence page automatically with the relevant label, and that includes a page properties report, which in turn will make it appear in here. So very straightforward, but very useful. At any point in time, I can go in and look at the relevant release notes. Now, this is kind of an index page for the release notes. Now let's look at the few possibilities in terms of release notes layout that are available within ARN. Now, this is a Confluence page which was created using automated release notes, and you'll notice a few things in here. First is you can have your own branding as part of the release notes that are generated. Then you have the different sections that spell out which stories went live, which improvements went live, which bugs were fixed, and so on. This is a very simple way of representing the release notes. And this is what we usually see a lot of teams doing. This is obviously supported right out of the box. We call this layout the sequential layout. You'll come to understand it in a few moments when I jump to the app. But also notice, in addition to the actual release notes content, you can also spell out for the end users how many items you have released. So kind of stats, you can easily highlight the stats that were part of this release. This was the sequential layout. The other layout that I wanted to talk about was the tabular layout. Again, this is a page that was created using automated release notes app, and this is just a different format as far as the release notes is concerned. Now, in terms of content itself, you'll have spotted by now that it has a bunch of additional fields and not just summary, right? So there is the key Jira issue key, then you have status, you have the linked issues, and you have hosting and add-on, which are the custom fields. So this is the tabular layout. Now, with this in your minds, let's look at the actual app. I've navigated to the automated release notes screen inside of a Jira project, and you'll see a bunch of templates that are already available and listed. Now, first and foremost, you are trying to create release notes in multiple formats, right? And in multiple layouts. That's why you have the opportunity to choose which type of template you are creating. The gist of ARN comes from these two tabs, templates and rules. Templates is how you determine the content of your release notes, the layout of your release notes, and rules is how you actually create the final release notes document and send it out or publish depending on the channel involved. So here you have support for email, PDF, Confluence, JSON, HTML, Markdown, and JSD announcement, which is JSM announcement as of today. Now, depending on which type of template you are using, you're going to get a few additional areas within the template builder. This is how the template builder looks like. If you recall, I had changed this to Confluence, so I have support for some additional macros that I can insert right into the template builder. This template builder is where you can publish your own content. And by now you may have guessed this as well. There is static text, which is a normal string, which are normal data points. And then you have these strings that are within the square brackets. These are variables. Again, we are still talking about templates only. So here you're not supposed to provide any specific information on a given Jira version or a given Jira release. Here you are just inserting a generic data set, generic information. Now, I guess this would be clearer, but the gist of the template builder comes from the JQL section. And the JQL sections, although they seem like they are broken, they are not. They just behave differently on different browsers. You'll notice there are 5 JQL sections inserted by default: stories, new features, improvement, tasks, and bugs. Obviously, you can modify this based on whatever your needs are. I'll just open up one of the existing JQL sections to explain how the final result of getting the relevant information in release notes pans out. Now you'll notice here, this edit JQL section pop-up has 3 tabs. First one is section, second one is fields, and then the third one is layout. In the section tab, really what's going to matter the most is this JQL. The real power of ARN comes due to its usage of JQL. Now, if you are conversant with JQL, which is Jira query language, you'll have guessed by now that it's actually a little different than JQL. If we were to copy this entire JQL and put it in Jira, it may not really work out. It'll throw an error because these variables, project ID and version ID, that you see in square brackets, that are not supposed to be there in Jira. In Jira, you directly call out that this is equal to maybe AR and it will still work, right? That's the main difference. Now, if you look at this JQL, what's it doing? It's fetching all of the Jira issues, which are of the type story, for a given fixed version and for a given project, right? So which Jira tickets, which Jira issues should be pulled into your final release notes document is dictated by this JQL. And by now, you would have realized that you can add as many and or clauses to this and ensure that only the relevant information is available in the final release notes. So what I mean by that is, for example, you can create a custom field that determines whether this issue should be visible to the customers or not. And based on that custom field, you determine whether the JQL should pull in those items or not. So it just becomes extremely flexible to fetch any Jira issues that are relevant for your audience. You can essentially create as many custom fields as you would need, and then based on those, determine whether any given issue should be visible in the final release notes document for, say, your executive team, your internal development team, your customers, your support team, and so on. So once you understand how the JQL is incorporated in here, you can do pretty much anything based on it. Now, this part is simple. You insert the JQL, it validates it. But what about getting only the relevant information? So with the help of JQL, we have said we'll only fetch relevant issues. But with the help of this fields tab, we'll dictate which data points from those Jira issues should be fetched into your final release notes document. By default, you'll see there is priority, key, summary, status, but there is no reason for you to stick to those default fields. You can use your own custom fields or default attributes from Jira and ensure that a relevant document is created for your target audience. So if you notice, we have a bunch of custom fields that we specifically utilize for maintaining external customer facing release notes. Let's say I don't want, maybe I want the key, but priority, showing the priority does not make sense for our end users who are supposed to read this release notes document. I'll just remove that. And also, since I'm going to send this out to customers, it doesn't make sense for me to display issue key as a link because they are not going to have access to that issue anyway. They don't have access to our Jira. So I simply change this setting and say, don't display it as a link, simply display it as a text. And maybe even status is not needed. That. So you have now dictated which data points should be available in your release notes document. You can, utilizing this, you can even generate a release notes document across multiple languages in just a single click, or even without any click based on automation, right? So for example, if you are creating a template for, say, German language, you'll only pull the German language custom field. For French language, you'll only pull the French language custom field, and so on. So this is one-time setup. Once you have done it, it's all going to be automated. Now comes the formatting part. So you have tabular layout and sequential layout. I'll go back to the earlier screen and share the tabular layout once again. So this is the tabular layout that is being referenced. Now, in case of a tabular layout, it's fairly straightforward. You don't have to do anything. Automatically, all the fields that you have chosen, they become columns in this sequence, which you can change by dragging and dropping in the final release notes document that is generated as a table. Now, mind you, this is only for a single JQL section. You can insert multiple JQL sections. Maybe one JQL section could be formatted as a table, the other one in the sequential format. It's totally up to you. The tabular layout is simple, like I showed you here, whereas the sequential layout is a little more complex than that. Let me just delete these fields so the upper part looks simple. Now, sequential layout, you actually have to create it on your own. Now, what I mean by that is, again, going back to this, here you'll notice this is summary that's being populated, right? Now, in order to achieve this kind of structure in the final release notes document, you'll basically insert a bullet and you will utilize the variable that's shown at the top, this one here. So any fields that you have added in the second tab, they'll appear as variables in the upper part, which then you can customize further. Let's say you want this to be in this format. Maybe I'll want to highlight the key. So what I can do is, let's make it blue. Right now, what will happen is once you save this layout, every item that's returned as part of this JQL, when you're generating the release notes, it will follow the same pattern. First, summary will be populated, followed by a hyphen, and then followed by the key. So you can create any layout that's appropriate for your target audience, right? So once you understand how the JQL section works, the rest is going to be extremely simple. You add images, you add variables, you add static content, and you are done. Now you have configured the template. I've not really added any macros, but once you have these templates available, it's now the time to put in place the automation. Again, if you still want to ensure that you are doing the right thing, maybe you have the right formatting, you can simply preview it for a specific version. So for example, if I wanted to understand whether my internal release notification is behaving as expected, I'll click on preview. Now, system is intelligent enough to understand that there are multiple version variables used, and so it will ask me to provide as many version variables. So what I'm doing is I'm generating release notes from 3 versions. When I click on preview, I'll end up seeing the actual release notes that are generated based off that template and the 3 variables that were provided, or the 3 versions rather that were provided to the app. So this will let you understand whether your template is spitting out the desired layout and the desired content. Once you have verified that, it's now your turn to turn to the automation part. Now I've created a dummy rule. First, let me help you quickly understand the triggers. Manual trigger is straightforward, right? Someone has to come in and click on this run button to generate the release notes. Version created is whenever a version is created inside of Jira, this rule gets triggered. Whenever a version is marked as released inside of Jira, this rule gets triggered. Scheduled before end days of release, for example, here you can specify 5 days. So what it will do is it will trigger the rule 5 days before the upcoming release in the given project. So a typical use case this tries to address is keeping your team on their toes when there is an impending release, maybe five days down the line, 15 days down the line, whatever your process looks like. Then you also have scheduling at interval. So the same rule can get triggered every 12 hours, every 7 days, whatever cron expression you configure as part of this text box. And then finally, the DevOps folks would get really excited about this is webhook. So you can trigger this automation rule within automated release notes app for Jira using a webhook from any external tools such as Jenkins, Circle CI, TeamCity, any CI/CD tools that you already have. So in fact, we have seen a bunch of our customers generate release notes, or rather trigger such rules as soon as their builds are deployed on production, right? So we're done with templates, we are done with triggers. Now, how do you configure the actions? Each rule can contain n number of actions. There is no limit. So for example, if you wanted to generate say 10 variants for 10 different stakeholders of the same release note, you basically create those 10 actions inside of this and trigger the rule once. That's it. It will generate all the 10 variants in one go. When you're adding the, let's say, email action, you'll have to choose the template that's involved in here. For Confluence, you'll choose the Confluence template and so on. Depending on what type of action you are choosing, there will be some additional configurations. For example, let's say if you wanted to publish release notes in the PDF format and attach that document in the email that's going out, you can do that. You just select the PDF template. You can do that for Markdown, JSON, HTML as well. For cloud, it's even possible to send out the release notes via your own configured email address. And then you determine who is supposed to receive this email, whether it's Jira users, project roles, Jira groups, or plain email addresses that you can enter as comma separated values. So obviously this will change for Confluence. When you're doing it for Confluence, you'll pick the Confluence template, you'll decide the space key. You'll also decide whether the page needs to be created fresh or whether it should be updated if it already exists, or simply if you want to create or rather append or prepend to an existing page. You can also apply parent page ID and labels, which are optional right from ARN itself. Now, an important thing to understand here, by using the functionality to append or prepend to an existing Confluence page, you can create something like this. This is a running release notes page that we maintain on our documentation. And this is entirely maintained via automated release notes. Every time there is a new release, I'll show you the rule so that you understand the scope of this automation. You'll notice ARN Cloud Prod. So this is our actual production rule. Whenever there is a new release, someone will just come in and check the version that's going live or that went live. And just when I click on OK, it will end up updating this running release notes page. So this is automated and maintained completely via ARN. Now, another thing, obviously, I've just touched the tip of the iceberg using this. We have seen a number of customers address different use cases. Another important thing, and that I had added as a bonus in that presentation, was release pages and widgets. So you can insert the release notes widget right inside of your SaaS application, similar to this. For example, here we have inserted. Now this is coming from automated release notes itself. And you can clearly tell, so this is 27th of September. This is 27th of September. So we are utilizing the same content and then providing the release notes within your app. There is also this concept of a release page. Now let me open up the release page. It's similar to a status page, but maintained automatically. This is a standalone page that you can create. And by the way, this feature is available only for the cloud version. Here, right now, we are working on the ability to subscribe to the release notes updates, subscribing to the release page, and it will be live soon. Now, there is also calendar, which is not really the core of the application. It just simply shows up all of the releases in the given project. If you click on any of it, it will show you the status based on their status category distributions. Now, going back to the slides. All right. Let's see if there are any questions. Mithila?
We don't have any questions from the attendees, but questions which we generally get, I'll just call those out. The first one is, can you generate release notes from multiple versions as well as cross projects?
Right. So this is actually very common question that we get, and it's definitely possible to generate release notes from multiple versions as well as cross projects. That's simply dependent on how you configure your templates. So let me pull up one of the templates to showcase how you can generate release notes from multiple versions. Now, if you look at this one has a single version variable, or rather it already has a couple of version variables. So it says fix version in version name 1, version name 2. So by utilizing such numbered variables, you inform the system that you are utilizing multiple variables, or rather multiple versions. So the system will automatically ask from you multiple version inputs. Now, when you try and preview this, you'll actually have to provide multiple version inputs. Now, this works completely fine when you are trying to generate release notes from multiple versions, but which are in a single project. For generating release notes that are from different projects, you can utilize our app automated release notes, but via a different screen that we call as cross project screen. You can create similar templates. So if I were to go to the cross project screen, the only difference will be, in this case, you'll be asked to choose not just the versions, but also the projects. So I just clicked on preview, and you'll notice this involves cross project multiple versions. So here I'll choose the project and then I'll choose the version. So for example, I can generate release notes from 2 different projects. Maybe let's use this, and here I'll get a different version. So you can utilize this, and this will generate the final release notes document for cross project variant. Now this becomes extremely useful when you have say microservices scattered across different Jira projects, or multiple packages ending up in a single product that are scattered across different Jira projects, and so on. But definitely there is the possibility to generate cross project release notes.
All right. Thanks, Anand. We have one more question.
Right.
What is the difference between a paid and a free version on cloud?
Right. I forgot to talk about the free version. So for the cloud hosting, we have a free version of automated release notes. Now, if you're used to utilizing Jira's native release notes screen, the free version would definitely be a step ahead. What it does is it lets you create all types of templates. There is no restriction on that front. It could be PDF, email, Confluence, anything. And once you have created those templates, the only restriction in the free version is on the number of automations that you can execute in a given month, which is limited to 5. So if there are automations that you need to use more number of times, then the paid version is probably more useful. But if you are used to copy pasting the release notes from Jira, then you can probably improve that workflow and just utilize the free variant, because it allows you to customize the entire layout as well as content of the release notes. So you just come in here, preview the template, and copy the content to be pasted over into another application that you are already using. And another limitation that we have as of today is the cross project calendar for the free version allows only two projects rather. Whereas in case of a paid version, you can have as many projects displayed in the cross project calendar. Any other question, Mithila, we had?
That's all.
Awesome. So before I wrap up, just one last thing for the attendees here. Once you install the app, you'll also be able to look at the roadmap that's available out there. You can actively participate in the discussion and influence the direction in which the product is getting developed. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for attending. And if you have any follow-up questions, we are still here for the next 10-15 minutes. You can also send your emails to this email address. After this, you have a bunch of interesting sessions coming up that are listed on this slide. Thank you.